Are you Laura Palmer?
Hello, you're listening to the Lodger's Sordid Cinemas Twin Peaks podcast one more time. My name is Simon Howell, and as always, I'm joined by Kate Redebaum.
Hey, everybody.
Woo! We're sort of back. Briefly.
Sort of.
It's the return for us, and it's not. You're not getting 18 more hours out of us. Sorry. So yeah, we're back because. Okay, so here's the deal. We are planning one more big finale episode that we think will happen, assuming all the cards line up or whatever mixed metaphor you want to throw out there. But in the meantime, CBS was nice enough to send us copies of The Return on Blu-ray.
Yes.
So thank you, CBS, for that.
As someone who lives in, the bowels of academia and has to deal with the kind of general sort of incompetence and bureaucratic nightmareness that passes for day-to-day operations in academia, dealing with CBS was like a magical wonderland of people who are really good at their jobs and are very polite and are really lovely and wonderful. And so I just wanted to really give a shout out to, and it wasn't actually CBS, it was a publicity company that I believe was handling this Blu-ray release for CBS, but they were lovely, and so I really just wanted to make sure we really emphasized how great they were, and I really appreciate them sending us these sets, which I think is what you were going to say.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look, would I have liked to have gotten it a couple of weeks before everybody else so that I could have gloated about it on social media? Yes. Instead, I ended up getting it on release day, which is, fine, especially considering apparently Amazon has run out or something. So a lot of people aren't going to be getting it until the week of Christmas or later, which is really bad.
Yeah, especially for people who pre-ordered them and sort of, they did their due diligence of making sure they put their names down very early on and still aren't getting copies. And then apparently stores are sold out as well. This is a story I've heard in lots of places, which, on the one hand is really wonderful for the show. And I'm so glad that Twin Peaks is getting that kind of publicity, that it's Blu-rays and DVDs are selling out all over the place and they can't keep them in stock. That's awesome. But unfortunate for the poor people who didn't get copies. I did get my reviewer copy, maybe 3 or 4 days before Simon, which was good. I think the story was that the company that was making the Blu-rays, they literally did not have them physically produced until maybe a week before they were supposed to go out to stores. So it was a tight turnaround for everybody, but we did get an extra weekend. So Olivia and I thought to ourselves that we were going to spend all last weekend just powering through and doing an 18-hour rewatch. And this was our dream. We'd been holding off. We hadn't been letting ourselves rewatch old episodes on Showtime. We were we're going to wait till the Blu-rays come and we're just going to do a full weekend marathon. It's going to be amazing. And we're going to see all these things we'd never seen before. And then flash to Saturday morning, and I'm going to refrain from swearing, but the tax bill news that had made it through the second round came out that morning, thereby ruining not just our day, but the general mood in the entire country. And so trying after that to sit down for a 9-hour marathon of lights darkened, all the windows covered, watching Twin Peaks, we kind of realized at about hour 5 that if we did this 2 days in a row, we might kill ourselves. So we decided to not keep doing that, but we did watch up to episode 9 on one day, which was quite an experience. It was interesting just doing that. So maybe I think next weekend we're going to watch the back half. But anyway.
Yeah, having not had it as long as you, I haven't even had time for a rewatch. The real purpose of this podcast episode is mainly to discuss the bonus features. Mm-hmm. So, fair warning, if you, not that there's anything to spoil really, but if you want to be totally, if you want to go in totally cold on that stuff for some reason, then don't listen to this, I guess. But some people might appreciate hearing about it in advance, and I think there's some interesting stuff to talk about in the documentary content, especially Before we got any further, I had to mention, because this happened well after we wrapped on the return episodes. But you had a fantastic Twin Peaks Halloween costume. And really calling it a costume is a disservice. It was a production.
It was. There was stage directions and lighting and music and like sound effects.
It was really something, and you very deservedly won the Twitter Twin Peaks Halloween costume contest, and none other than K-Mac himself slid into your DMs, which was magical.
Yeah, that whole thing was totally bonkers, and I'm still very much enjoying all of it. It was lovely. So for people who didn't follow this when it happened, I had been planning a Twin Peaks Return themed Halloween party, for my friends in Cambridge who also like the Return, and basically just to subject a bunch of other people who aren't into the Return, just to subject them to a bunch of weird costumes, which was very exciting. So I had planned on making this kind of intense costume, and the costume was Nido, or I guess the eyeless woman, however you want to call her, or also Diane. Anyway, so I had been planning on making that costume, and then we also got the idea that we should try to make the evolution of the arm, like the tree with the head on it. And then this got sort of more and more extreme, and then we were like, okay, now I'm going to buy red fabric to try to make curtains, and I'm going to buy the black and white zigzag fabric and make this whole kind of set, which was very fun and a necessary distraction from the general drudgery that is applying for postdocs, which is its own level of misery, not knowing where we're going to have to move in 6 months and blah, blah, blah. So this was a necessary diversion from that. For 3 weekends, I worked on all of this stuff. But I didn't have any idea that there was this costume contest thing happening. I sort of only found out about it the night before or whatever. So got Olivia to take photos of it and put it up, and got really amazing, wonderful reactions from people online. And yes, a couple of days later, then Kyle MacLachlan chose it as the winner and wrote to me, and I got to have a very brief conversation with Kyle MacLachlan, which was lovely. I just said this is amazing, thank you so much, and he responded, and he was thank you. He was thank you for sticking with us, and I was oh no, it's just that to me had a kind of an odd ring. I was oh man, does it feel like people aren't sticking with you? I was I hope not. I was we should all be sticking with you. And I wrote back and I was watching The Return has been one of the great pleasures of my adult life, so no need to thank me for sticking with it, but anyway, it was great. And then maybe a week later, he sent, or his PR person sent a box full of stuff, which was the prize. And I'm going to try to remember all of it off the top of my head. There was a log pillow, which I think was one of the things they produced for the South by Southwest log party thing in advance of the show. So there was the log pillow. I got a mug that says "I am Dougie's Coffee" on it, and it is a really perfect replica of the one in the show, which is super awesome. There was a keychain that had the Great Northern, Coop's key room number on it, which was awesome. There was a print of a thing that I think Lynch drew that had sort of a pie and a log and some other Twin Peaks thing. A couple of t-shirts, and a Coop, little doll, one of those Funko Pop head doll things. So it was a pretty good haul of stuff. It was great. But certainly, that was great. The whole thing was insane though, Simon. I think the Instagram post when it finished, I haven't checked it lately, but it had 18,000 likes on it when it finished.
Jesus.
And on Twitter there were I don't know, a lot. I haven't checked what the Twitter number was. It wasn't as high as Instagram, but it was very high. And for the 2 weeks after, everywhere I went, I was running into people and meeting them at a conference in Toronto, and they were recognizing me from Twitter, which was super crazy. I've never had anything like that happen to me before. And people were I think I saw you on my Twitter feed. Are you this person? I was holy crap, that's terrifying. But anyway, it was amazing and lovely and a true highlight and very fun payoff to all of this Twin Peaks stuff. So shout out to Kyle MacLachlan for being rad and being really lovely to his fans.
That rules. Everything about that rules. And you certainly earned it. I mean, I don't think I've ever spent more than 20 minutes on a Halloween costume. So serious props were due, and you got them. So it's one of the few times there hasn't been a lot of justice this year. So that was nice to see.
That is nice. You're right about that. There's definitely not been a lot of justice. So probably hence why I felt the need to like shut myself away from the world and work on a costume for 3 weeks, because the world has been
Everything
not
is
a
bad.
wonderful place lately. Exactly. Exactly.
Anyway, things that aren't so bad. So since people might not get their grubby paws on this set for a couple of weeks in some cases, I just wanted to mention the packaging is pretty cool. The cover does what I hoped it would when I saw the design, which is that it splits open in the middle of middle of Dale's head, which is very cool. I'm not totally wild about the disc holder things. I would have preferred like in these like they're just like cardboard sleeves really. Whereas like actual jewel case holdy things. I don't know what the technical term is. I don't know. Those would have been way preferable, but I mean, it's pretty snazzy, I gotta say.
It is. I mean, I think like many people, I have some reservations about the cover art. I think it is improved once you are holding it in your hand and it slides open, and then there's actually a third image of Dougie Cooper behind it, so you get the 3 Coops as you open it up, and so that sort of improves it. But I do think very much that design of that cover reads to me like someone who is not a designer had a conceptual idea for what they wanted the cover to look like, and then it sort of got passed over to maybe a designer who was forced to work with that, rather than letting it be something that could have been a little more designed from the beginning. I just think there could have been a nicer way to do that. It to me, it's not the most aesthetically attractive cover, but it also isn't terrible, and it's also sort of like a very minor complaint. I mean, I think, as you say, Simon, I agree. I do think it would have been appreciated to have real sleeves. And for people who, again, aren't like Blu-ray nerds or DVD nerds, all this means is that if you have the cardboard sleeves, the disc moves around more in the pocket and it is much more likely to get scratched, whereas the jewel case ones actually hold it off of the background, so there's much less likelihood they're going to get kind of destroyed going forward. But whatever, we'll just have to take really good care of our prized possession.
I'm going to try not to huck it across the room too much. I mean, really, my ideal, like, Blu-rays can't deliver my ideal Twin Peaks review experience, which would be like if I could somehow get every scene, like if I somehow had like an 8-disc changer and could just like play the entire series on shuffle, like not just the episodes but like the scenes, the sequences. And then just keep it on in my house all the time, like ambient music. That would be the ideal way to watch it. It would have also been nice. I'm assuming the retail version also doesn't include digital versions. This version didn't either, which is too bad. That would have been nice to have. But we have 18, well, more like 27 hours of free entertainment, so I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, and I get why they did that. I think probably at this point they're still fairly concerned about like piracy stuff. People will put all of this up online at some point. It'll get out there. But it's funny that you said that about the wanting to be able to shuffle things, because like when Olivia and I powered through the 9-hour replay, I have to admit, like, I was finding myself wishing that as well. And part of that was just that we haven't had enough time to sort of get the distance on the original watch of the show to have sort of a new experience going back to it. Like, Olivia and I were both finding that we weren't really able to see these sort of new connections, like watching it all in a row, because we were getting caught up in just like the ways we had thought about it the first time around, right? Like as these sort of individual parts. And I actually think like that ability to kind of shuffle the scenes a little bit would just be like amazingly wonderful. It would give you a really different sense of how things work together in the show. And I also don't think it would sort of be against what Lynch wants either. I mean, certainly some scenes you couldn't put in front of other ones, but I do really think there is a sense in which you could sort of pick and choose and move through the scenes differently, even on the Blu-ray sets. And it would give you just a new vantage point on the show as a whole without kind of like deteriorating its coherency or something in an interesting way. I don't know. Anyway. All just to say, I really wish I could watch it again for the first time. This is what I want, is I just want the ability to watch it again for the first time over and over again. Right.
And to return to something that when you were talking about McLaughlin and the possible reception to the return, it's amusing to me, and also a bit sad that, if this perception exists among people who made it, that there is like this immense backlash or whatever, that's funny to me because, you know, we swim in these, you know, cinephile circles where that is the utter opposite of the case. Mm-hmm. Like, where it's like so many of us have just like, this is the thing that gave us life this year.
Yeah, exactly. This is like the most important thing that is going on, period, pretty much. I mean, for people who, well, maybe do we want to talk about this right now? So I'm going to just get it out of the way. Let's do it. So I think yesterday or the day before or something, Cahiers du Cinéma, which is like the really famous film journal that's a French film journal, has been around since the 60s, and like it released its top film of the year list, and Twin Peaks: The Return was at the top, rightfully so, in my opinion. And this has been a thing all over the place. Lots of people have been putting it on their lists, whether they are talking about movies or television. And this has been a debate, like a massive kind of debate on Twitter for people who aren't part of Film Nerd Twitter. There has been a lot of fighting amongst people about whether it is acceptable to put Twin Peaks: The Return on top like year-end movie lists because it is, you know, ostensibly a television show. And the amount of energy that's gotten expended on this debate on Twitter is quite something. I don't know. I was saying to Simon before this started, I have sympathy with television critics who feel a little territorial around the idea that like now that there's this television show that has sort of like has been taken up so universally as a kind of like beloved critical object that people feel like they can just take that away from television and name it film. I get why television critics might be a little apprehensive about that because, you know, there's a longer history of television not really being given the same like cultural credit, the same kind of cultural capital that films get. So I get their frustration around that. I do. But at the same time, these are also just like year-end lists that people are often just making for their own like fun a lot of the time, and it just seems to me that I'm not entirely sure why there has to be so much like anger and vehemence expended over this kind of stuff. I mean, the show is calling itself both a movie and a TV show, so I'm not really sure why critics can't do the same thing, especially when we live in an era when so many films that come out in the theater are also playing on Netflix that same day. Like, you know, it's just these boundaries are not quite what they used to be. And while I understand why people are very like passionate about it, I'm kind of agnostic. I'm like, I want to call it a movie and I want to call it a TV show. Like, I think it's both things. I think it should get credit as both. So, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't, my favorite response to all this is, I think it was Nick Pinkerton who tweeted about what he calls the Haberman rule. Which is that whenever anyone has a movies versus TV debate, he pulls up Jay Haberman's best of list from 1986. Have you seen this?
No, I haven't.
So in 1986, Haberman published his top 10 list in, I think, the Village Voice, and he put Game 6 of the World Series on it.
That's amazing.
And, you know, that was 31 years ago, so it's like we should have settled this by now.
Yes, that is probably true. I don't know. I don't think that argument would work for every show. I mean, as TV critics have also pointed out, there are lots of television scenarios where the makers of the television show have been saying, oh, I'm actually making a mini movie, or this is like many movies, or so, you know, like that Lynch is not the first person to say that. That kind of rhetoric has been around before. But that being said, it's like, I think Twin Peaks is maybe slightly in a different category where it feels like it is actually doing that. I mean, it feels like it is both a television show and operating at the level of cinema. I don't think calling it cinema means that we're somehow exempting it from having an influence on television and playing a role in television and being television. I mean, I think it's both. I think that is what it is doing that's so radical, is showing that you could actually basically be operating at both levels at the same time. And I don't mean to degrade cinema. Like, of course, cinema, you need a theatrical experience, but I think it really says something that literally every cinephile I know would give their right arm to be able to watch The Return on a big screen. Like, Olivier and I would, I can't even tell you, like, what we would do to be able to make that happen. I have been talking to every theater person and film programmer I know, being like, when are you going to put this on a big screen? And of course, as people will tell you, it's tricky because, even though all of the people who are associated with The Return, like Sabrina Sutherland and Lynch and everybody, they are totally happy to have it play on a big screen. They want to have it play on big screens. But television rights and licensing are considerably more complicated than film licensing, because you often have like multiple companies who have stakes in a show and have money and need like approval and blah, blah, blah. So it's often much more difficult to show things like The Return on big screens, which is why it may not happen the way that people want it to happen.
And also, like, you can thread all those loopholes, and then you still have to find a way to program 18 hours of content.
Exactly,
like, to
exactly.
exhibit that. I don't really talk to a lot of TV critics, but I would imagine that if I was still in those circles, my argument would be, or rather my frustration would be, you know, it wasn't a great television year, I don't think, to be perfectly honest, but...
Yeah, well, except for Leftovers. Leftovers was
Leftovers was great, and like Leftovers and Twin Peaks, and a lot of people have cited, especially the final episode of Nathan For You as well.
Oh, Nathan For You, yeah,
which was wonderful, and like a whole other case. But like, even among shows that are generally considered to be good or very good, there is a lot of homogeneity in terms of storytelling, in terms of there's not a lot of mold breaking going on, even like among shows that are like generally considered to be good or great. And like, so if a show comes along and really breaks the rules, and then like, you know, and then cinema tries to claim it, it's like, oh, it's like it's saying, you know, like the medium can only be this. It can only be this sort of connect the dots storytelling that we're getting from, you know, basic. I'm not going to be, you know, glib or dismissive and say everything else, but there's like, you know, there's a clear degree of separation here.
Yeah. Which is fair enough. I think that makes sense. Yeah. So yeah, I guess we should talk about the actual set. Hey, we should do that. So let's do it.
If you've looked, so like full disclosure, I know that we haven't gone through everything yet. I know that we haven't watched the Comic-Con panel, which I believe is moderated by Damon Lindelof.
Yes, yeah, it is.
I'm actually looking forward to that, but I didn't
Me too.
have time
I am as well, yeah.
Didn't have time to get to that because I was a little busy with the 4 hours and 51 minutes that which is really a lot. That makes up the 10-part documentary by Jason S., who shot The Art Life, which I actually still have not seen.
Oh, he did? Well Jason S. shot The Art Life? I did not know that. Was he... Yep. Like, you just mean he was like the DP, or he wasn't the director, though, right?
No, he was not. He literally shot it. He was... I will pull up the exact credit. He did... Oh, sorry, yeah, he did the cinematography on The Art Life. So now...
Oh, I didn't know that, though. That's great.
That is the major thing. There's also, of course, the 2 half-hour shorts that Richard Bamer shot that are, I believe, exclusive to the Blu-ray.
Yeah, they're exclusive to the Blu-ray, as are the third, like 30-minute film by, and I should have his name here, but it's not right in front of me, unfortunately, by another kind of special features director who has directed special features on other things recently. I don't have his name here. Oh, here it is. Charles de Lazarica. I don't know how you pronounce that, but which is the feature A Very Lovely Dream, One Week in Twin Peaks, and that's the one where they he basically shoots a bunch of stuff as they return to the town of Twin Peaks and shoot a series of stuff in like North Bend, Washington, and in the sheriff's station there, which is a really nice featurette for sure.
I mean, the main thing that I will be of interest to people is clearly this massive 10-part doc where the aforementioned Jason S. sort of follows around So for anyone who is like, I'm gonna just tell you things that you're not getting, just so we're clear. Like, and most of you will know this already, just from having watched The Return. But like, for anyone who's hoping for elucidation on the themes of The Return, or like clarification about maybe some specific production questions they had, chances are like you're not gonna get what you're looking for. What you do get is, I mean, I would just like to say that we were right, because all those times that we were talking about the way that Lynch makes stuff, which is this combination of this tactility as well as that sort of dream logic stuff that he's famous for, sort of that combination of craftsman and dreamer, like that is 100% on display in like almost every frame of this thing.
Yes, that is very true. And oh man, there's a lot to dig into here, like how we even want to kind of talk about these, because I think to build on maybe what you're saying there as well, you can kind of talk about the sort of overall structure of what Jason S. and there's like a number of kind of co-makers in there whose names I unfortunately don't have in front of me either, but you can tell they were very heavily involved in putting everything together. And these are the people who like wrote the narration and did the scores for these pieces. I think it was a team of three. It was Jason S. and two other people. So there's this sort of like the structure of these pieces that they've put together, and we can dig into more how they put it together, because I think that's something that I just sort of wanted to make sure I said, which is I think sometimes it's easy enough to think that like behind the scenes documentaries are just, you know, it's just the footage like transparently being put in front of you, and it's great that they captured this footage and you're just sort of seeing it. And that's a fallacy. I mean, it's like there are bad and boring making of documentaries, and there are really good, fascinating, interesting making of documentaries. And this one is very much a very good, fascinating, interesting one. And a lot of that is like there's some real intelligence and creativity in terms of how they are structuring this clearly like huge amount of material that Jason S. shot, like how they are structuring it and putting it together in a really kind of like patterned, coherent, but interesting way. And we can talk about more what that is and how he does that. But the framing devices here for each of these short films are these sort of like kind of semi-ethereal, opening gambits that happen over each ones, which usually involves some kind of like treated footage of one of the landscapes that they're shooting in. So if there's in Las Vegas or whatever, there's footage of like a landscape in Las Vegas that's been treated to look like it's kind of 18 millimeter or 16 millimeter film on the one hand, and then often there will be drone photography of landscapes. So a drone kind of moving through a landscape, and you can tell that it's a drone because the shots are uncannily perfect. Like they look digital in the sense that, a mechanical machine wouldn't be able to get that level of like fluidness through a space, but a drone can when it films. So anyway, so it opens with shots like these, and then there's this sort of narration that's built over top of it. And the narration, I think, as you were trying to get out there, Simon, like it kind of mirrors and extends what's going on with Lynch's personality, where you have this movement between this like ethereal, dreamy, otherworldly space, and then you go right into these sequences with Lynch like on the ground directing people in this kind of very straightforward, like, non-conceptual sort of way. Like often Lynch is literally just telling people what the scene is going to entail, like at length, which is a really fascinating kind of comparison. And I have more things to say about the narration, but does that sort of open up some of the things you were thinking about, Simon?
Yeah. The narration is real weird. Like I feel like it almost goes without saying for a Lynch thing, but it's sort of interesting to watch these, to see these like these non-Lynch people sort of do their take on like what is Lynchian while documenting him and his process and the filming. I had a few sort of like observations about the filming, that just things that kept popping into my mind while I was watching it, which is like the first one that kept coming to me was like to be an actor on this thing and like to do your bit and then you're done, and then to try, like, I just imagine that this really rings true with I think it was someone early on said, well, the only people who've read all this are like Frost and Lynch and Sabrina Sutherland and McLaughlin, and that's it. And you feel that while you're watching this set of documentaries, because you just imagine, okay, what if I were an actor on this? What would I think this was? Like how would I imagine the shape this was going to take? And truthfully, you'd have absolutely no goddamn idea. It's presented as this massive set of discrete environments and emotions and which I suppose is, true of a lot of projects, but because of the way this was just like this massive thing filmed in one go, and there are specific actors who they don't have a lot of time with, and there are stretches where Lynch is visibly frustrated with and audibly frustrated with the constraints of the production, which is interesting, and like I wasn't necessarily expecting to see in a DVD bonus feature. But anyway, I kept thinking about what it would be like to be like one of these people who's there for 2, 3, 4 scenes, and like what their perception of this process was like, and in a sense, like you almost long for those like conventional talking head segments that you would get in like sort of a more standard featurette, because I really want to know what they were thinking as this was all unfolding or not unfolding.
Well, that's interesting too, because we started, when we got the set after we did our 9-hour rewatch, the impressions set, as they're called, this set of the Jason S. Films impressions. Those were the ones that we first started watching, and there is a really I wish I'd had time to watch them all twice, honestly, because there's a fascinating sense when you start watching them that, as you say, like there aren't talking heads, there isn't really any indication of like what you are going to get going forward. At a certain point, you start to figure out that like the structure that you're getting is what most of these are going to consist in, and so you can kind of settle into it. But all you're thinking is like, man, which actors are we going to get to see? Like, which scenes are we going to get to see? What are we going to get to see Lynch direct? Like there is a sense in which you're really caught up, like just wondering what these things are going to reveal to you. That it's for me, I got very focused on a lot of that, and so I feel like I missed some of the kind of like finer, nuanced details of these scenes that are unfolding in front of you. And I really am looking forward to going back and watching them again. But yeah, anyway, so I do think there is a sense in which that kind of like took so much of my attention. And one of the things I will mention is like, once you start getting into this, I was wondering, for example, like, are we going to get shots of him directing Catherine Coulson? Or are we going to get shots of him directing like Warren Frost? And I was kind of trepidatious about some of that, actually. I was like, this, as you say, something like the behind the scenes stuff, it's giving you more access than you expect in kind of odd ways. Like anybody who knows Lynch knows that he's kind of resistant to this kind of stuff, like giving people this much of a view into certain elements of how he does what he does. And so this is a shock anyway. And then you're sort of not sure how much you're going to get. And when I was like, maybe we're going to get these sort of very intimate scenes between Lynch and people, I was worried that it was going to be hard for them to avoid missteps with that. And then I was actually kind of relieved when we didn't get any of that stuff. By and large, these documentaries avoid those kind of encounters, I think, between Lynch and people that would have been so charged that seeing it, I think, would have felt like an imposition on the private relationship that Lynch has with those people. And so I really appreciate, actually, that the DVDs kind of stay out of that to a certain extent. But that being said, there are other areas where it goes much further than you expect. And I think the one that people have commented a lot already in terms of this, like in just reviews that I've read online about it, is the fact that we get to see Lynch be angry so often is a really unusual thing, and not maybe exactly what you would expect from this kind of thing. Were you surprised by the Lynch being angry stuff?
I mean, not really. I mean, like, he's not pulling a David O. Russell in here. Like,
exactly.
You know, he has like rational disagreements about like concrete elements of the production and like scheduling, and there's a memorable sequence where he doesn't get the specific we know that it's not a plaster of Paris, because that's what he gets.
It's called fix it all is what he wants. Fix it all, and he doesn't get it.
Yeah, like that's quite memorable. But like there's really like honestly like his standards, like our standards of Lynch being mad like are probably not like they don't really rate on the Hollywood scale of like megalomaniacal directors of any kind. The when you were talking about charged interactions, like you're right, we don't get anything with Coulson or Warren Frost, which is probably good. But man, we do get one I thought very charged sequence of Lynch and Sherilyn Fenn hanging out and chain smoking and talking about her scenes, but also she makes a reference to when she quote gave him the business over over I assume the original draft of her scenes. And like, man, there is a lot going on in that sequence.
It's true. Well, it seems like some of that has become clearer since the final dossier came out, right? I mean, this idea that there were, it's complicated, but like that they had written a different version of her scenarios, basically, that was connected to, I think, the stuff that Frost covers in the final dossier, these like intervening years between the coma and then her life now and sort of what's happened to her in this town. And my understanding is that Sherilyn Fenn was not happy with that stuff. And so she put a lot of pressure on them to rewrite it. And this is sort of why Lynch ended up largely rewriting Audrey's scenes while they were shooting. And so Mark Frost has said in different interviews that he sort of gave his blessing to the rewrite. He thought it was better than what they'd originally come up with, and so they rewrote it. And this is like scuttlebutt that we maybe know from people who were involved in the shoot, but it does seem like in the original version, she had more screen time. Like when it was the different scenarios, she was supposed to film more scenes, but I think everyone agrees that they just weren't as good. So it was sort of this idea that like we ended up with less Audrey, but that the Audrey stuff was concentratedly much more interesting as a result. And so that's super cool. But it is interesting to see Sherilyn Fenn like hint at that, and to see it make its way into this set is really interesting as well.
Yeah. And they just like all the scenes, like it's also wild to watch like Lynch with new actors versus Lynch with actors who he's been working with for a long time. One of my favorite Lynch tics that I didn't know about is like until I watched this, is the first time he meets, it seems like every time he meets a new actor for the first time and he looks at them and they look like this is what I think happens, and they look like he expects, and so then he says good deal. Which I just love for some reason.
A good deal, or what's the other one I think he says? Great to see you. Great to see you. I love it.
Good deal.
Great to see you. Watching this set, like Lynch physically reminds me very much of like my grandfather, who is no longer alive. But there is something very endearing about like, you know, watching Lynch be excited and like be happy on this set is brings me such joy. Like I just to see his face light up when he gets to see sets that have been made, like to bring, you know, this world that's in his head, like bring it out into the world. It's just gives me such joy. And like to see him be very happy to engage these like actors who are, you know, designed and wearing these outfits that he's chosen and everything. It just like, I love it. It makes me very happy to see him be excited or see him be very kind of like emotionally involved with sets, with scenes that he's directing. There are a couple of scenes that he's directing where he is emoting as much as the actors, if not more, like behind the video screen, which is kind of amazing. Like to watch Lynch be that intensely engaged with what's going on in front of the camera I just think it must be exhausting work. Like this direct, not just organizing a set like that, but being that kind of emotionally engaged and that on and that directive and that responsive for hours at a time. Like as you know, 70 years old, like it's impressive that Lynch is doing that at the pace and scale they were doing it with the show. So anyway.
Yeah. And it's also interesting to watch him work in this mode where like clearly they have a lot to do and they don't have like, I forget exactly how long the shoot was.
I think it was 60 days total.
That's not
crazy.
A lot. That's really not a lot.
Just so people in the audience have a general idea, my understanding is that 60 days is about average shooting length for a feature length film. So for an hour and a half long film, you'd have 60 days. These guys had 60 days to produce 17 hours technically, but 18 hours of television, which is crazy. Like, that is crazy. And I think this is one of the other really fascinating things about these behind the scenes documentaries is, how much they reveal for, maybe fans who are fans and are watching these special features but weren't that engaged with all of the kind of behind the scenes money talk about what was going on here. And the idea that, when the show was given the green light to go up to 18 episodes from 9, they didn't get any extra money. It was the same budget as the 9 episode scenarios. So they're having to pay for everything. This is part of why the shoot had to be so tight. It was so that they would have money to cover all this stuff and pay all the actors and everybody that they needed to pay. And you can regularly see Lynch becoming frustrated, as you said earlier, because of this stuff specifically. And I think this is an interesting, we can always come back to this question about the psychology of Lynch and his relationship to anger, because I don't think it's as, I get kind of frustrated when people are like, oh, Lynch is this Zen guy and and he's this Midwesterner. And I'm like, that's a story that has very little to do with what the guy is actually like. But anyway, but you can tell here that specifically why he is getting frustrated and when he loses it occasionally is because he's having to work under these constraints that are really not the ways in which he wants to work. And there's a really interesting scene towards the end in one of these production meetings where he kind of loses it on, it sounds like Sabrina Sutherland and his first AD, director guy, I think Scott Cameron. He kind of loses it on them, and he's so frustrated that they have their own sets, and so they should have more time in a sheriff's office scene, and they don't. And this is because they don't have money to pay a certain actor to stay for longer. And Lynch is like, I'm never working like this again. This is horrible. And he's swearing a lot, and he's really upset. And he's like, this gives me no time to sort of let things breathe and get creative and get dreamy, as he calls it, which is a great way to describe it. And I don't know. I don't know. I found all of that very enlightening to think about how those kinds of frameworks are at play in, the aspects of the show that maybe people were less than thrilled with all the time. That there were certain scenes that did, where people were claiming things didn't feel 100% figured out, and maybe we can talk about this when we do our next episode with our guests or something. But there was a really fascinating point in the documentary here where Lynch hints at the fact that there is a scene in the sheriff's station that he still hasn't figured out. He doesn't know what to do with. He hasn't written it down yet, and he's been thinking about it forever, and he still hasn't been able to figure it out. And, Olivia and I are like, maybe that's the green glove scene, the showdown with Bob at the end, because that still feels like it. And it's this idea that Lynch really didn't have time or resources or the ability to play as much as he would like to get where he wanted to go the way that he would want to on his own. You know what I mean? And there are good things about that too. I get having constraints is necessary and important, so I don't mean to say just Lynch should get whatever he wants, but it was a really fascinating angle on some of those questions, I think.
Now I'm just imagining David Lynch in Synecdoche, New York, getting his genius grant to build an ark or whatever. And just, I don't picture that ending well. So I think constraints are good.
Yes.
And speaking of constraints, there's another very specific stretch where it becomes clear that they're not going to have Miguel Ferrer for very long. I think they have a week with him. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't clear to me, was that a scheduling issue or was that a health issue?
No, I don't think it was a health issue. They say explicitly that he had accepted a different role in another television show. And I think you could tell there was some anger maybe against him actually because he had done this. Not from Lynch, but you could tell there was rumblings among the crew or something.
Right,
so this is why Lynch is having to calm them down.
And he specifically is I'm not recasting this. We're going to make it work. And that made me think about Krista Bell because she only appears once or twice in the 5 hours. But if Ferrer is only on set for a week, almost all of her scenes are with Albert. So that means that all those things we said before about how she's an inexperienced actor working for the first time in a Lynch production, and that's insane. Add to that the fact that she probably ended up having to do a lot of that in an extremely condensed time span. Just throwing that out there.
It's true. And as well, the idea that with the tight shooting schedule, they just had less space for takes too. I mean, there are a couple of scenes where you get the sense that they are doing 2 takes for some of the stuff that they're shooting. And I think in some scenarios that's a good thing. In some scenarios it takes pressure off of actors who feel with the rise of digital shooting, it's like now can be common in some scenarios to have to do an insane number of takes for something. And like, there's a great scene where Michael Cera shows up for his thing as Wally Brando and I think this is in the Lauzarica documentary, and Lucy is saying, you could tell Cera like thought they were going to have to do sort of 10, 12 takes of his whole speech, and he goes through it once, and Lynch is like, Michael, do you have one more in you? And Michael was like, only one more? Like, yeah. And so he was thrilled that he only had to do 2 takes of this. Like, he was so happy. So there, it goes both ways. But I do think that this idea that you might get two to maybe not that many more takes for certain shots, like that would definitely affect a pace of an actor who's sort of learning to get their feet under them in this kind of scenario too, for sure.
Yeah. What I also think is interesting is what's not in this. Like, this is a massive documentary project, and yet Mark Frost is like, does he even make an appearance?
He does not really. You might be seeing him once or twice briefly in the Impressions ones. He shows up more in the other ones. He shows up in both the Beamer films and the Lauzarica one. He has a little bit of presence there, but he's not really in the Impressions ones at all. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's not a lot of Frost. The docs are restricted to the shooting process, so we don't get any sense of what I would have loved to have seen. Some stuff with Dwayne Dunham dealing with like piecing this massive project together, and them working on the post effects and things like that. I would have loved more about the music supervision and like the Roadhouse and all that. So even with like this, something like 8-9 hours of bonus content, some of which, as I said, we haven't actually had a chance to watch yet, it still feels like it's barely scratching the surface of just like how this came together.
No, it's totally true, and it's so funny to me that like you get to the end of the what is it, 4.5 hours or something of the
4 hours and 51 minutes according to my
4 hours and 51
thing,
minutes of the Impressions one, and like I get to the end and I just was like, how like I'm like angry at it that there isn't more of it. There's something so funny about the idea of showing us so much of this this background process, and you're just left feeling at the end like, holy man, Jason S. must have so much more footage, and like, why can you not just give it all to me? I just want like perfect transcendental access to everything that happened, which is of course insane. But there is something very funny about. I think that's maybe worth pointing out. Like, I like that about those documentaries, that they don't use those kind of like formal conventions that pretend as if this behind the scenes thing is, quote, giving you everything you need to know about behind the scenes, as if it's giving you this kind of perfect access where everything is being wrapped up and packaged in like talking heads and in on-screen text that like tells you where things are and what the timeline is. You don't get any of that in this. So like you often feel like you're kind of being led into these like really gorgeous, amazing moments that are unfolding between Lynch and people, or really just fascinating moments. But you don't know where you are. Like, it's never clear when any of these things are really happening in relation to anything else. And you always, and this is something else that I really like formally about the Impression set, is that Jason S. will often really just train the camera on Lynch. And so you see Lynch's face, you see his reactions to other people, but you're often missing key information about who the other figures are in the room, like who Lynch is talking to, what else is happening. And there's a scene where like Lynch yells at people for being in a rehearsal space when he like doesn't want them there and he's annoyed that they're in there. And it seems like he yells at Peter Deming too. He's like, you shouldn't be in here either. And he like kicks his DP out of the room, but you can't be 100% sure because you can't tell who is off camera. But like, these kinds of things, it creates like a real spectatorial interest, I think. This idea that, again, these Impressions documentary, it refuses to give you the idea that you have perfect access to some behind the scenes thing. It feels very much like you have a limited but like, kind of irreplaceable viewpoint on it, I guess.
Yeah. And there's also an interesting balance between, like, we get Lynch, sort of the taskmaster, the hands-on director who like really wants to produce certain effects in this very limited time, in effects in every sense. But then also like whenever I think we see like almost every major performer's rap, Like
Yes,
there's
yeah.
at least
Yeah.
there's like 8 or 9, not only individual actors, but each McLaughlin character gets their own rap.
That was great. Oh, especially when it comes after McLaughlin's speech to Lynch at the end. You get like when McLaughlin gets his real rap, he gives this sort of speech to Lynch in front of a bunch of the crew, and like I'm not gonna lie, I got a little teary. It was a pretty affecting speech, and then you go to this kind of joke of David Lynch giving every character of McLaughlin's a rap, which was really funny. But anyway.
Obviously, like you're never going to get, like you said, the complete picture, but I do think that, like, and I haven't seen The Art Life, so I can't speak to this, but I think you do get, if nothing else, you really do get a what seems to be a fairly complete idea of what it is like to work for Lynch and to work with him. At least on this kind of project where there are constraints, you get an impression of what he is like as a person who labors on film, which is cool. Which is like, and you might think you don't need 5 hours for that, but we disagree.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and I also think, and I think that's an important point to make too, is that I think you get a sense of what Lynch is like working on this kind of project in this thing. The way Lynch works, and this is one of the things that's so fascinating about him, is that like I think his modes are very different depending on what the constraints are like and what the environment is like. And if you watch, there's some really in-depth. I think it's quite long. I think it's like an hour and some. There's a really fascinating similarly making of thing on the Inland Empire DVD sets, where you see basically some of the same things we see here, but more so. Like for example, in the Return impression set, you get things like Lynch. When they're shooting one part of the sheriff's station and there's the hole in the ground where I think it's the Bob bubble or a flame or something comes out of it, and Lynch is like, go get me 12 eggs and some black
Cream
paints
corn.
and then like cream corn, and then they make this like incredibly disgusting mess all around the hole. And literally, Simon, all I could think at the end of that was, which poor like set PA has the job of having to clean up like rotten egg goo off the floor later. So it's like, oh my god. But anyway, so there's that part of it. But then like, and they do that really quickly and they get it perfect and blah blah blah. But then on the Inland Empire ones, you'll see Lynch spending like, I don't know, an hour on his own completely working on a light fixture that he like wants to have a very specific way, and so he's going to build like the electrical wiring of the light fixture himself and blah blah blah. And that's the kind of stuff that he can't do in The Return. Like you see him making things a little bit, but clearly the pressure is there that prevents him from being able to do that. So anyway, so there's some fascinating stuff there as well, for sure.
Another thing, just one more thing that you don't get any of in this documentary. And also, again, this is part and parcel with like the other stuff that you don't see sort of by necessity. There's absolutely nothing about part 8. You
see some of the sequences that are being filmed. Like you see some part 8 sequences being filmed. There's the radio station, and there is.
Yeah, you're right.
You're right, but and the fireman's palace. You see some stuff in the fireman's palace, but we get nothing about the post-production stuff, which is what I wanted. That's what I wanted. But anyway, keep going.
Yeah, no, like it's for anyone. Like, again, anyone who is hoping for... I would have loved... There's a lot of stuff, even in, like, pre-production, that I would have loved. Like, people reacting to stuff. Just, like, getting script pages. Things like that. And just reckoning with what... Like, again, I could have used another... Like, ideally, I would have another 5-hour one for pre-production and another one for post-production. If I had that, I could stop complaining.
I don't know. I feel like none of it would be enough. I feel like until I literally get to have been on the set, until someone can transport me back in time and put me on the set for the entire shoot, I will not be entirely satisfied. But I mean, and there are other things that we don't get here, right? Like there are many swaths of actors that we don't get involved in this at all. Like for example, Machkin Amick turns up once in the background. She's standing behind Lynch watching him direct something in the Red Room, but you don't see any of her sequences. We don't see like Amanda Seyfried, nothing with creepy white-faced dude, Steven, what's his name? Becky's guy. Caleb Landry Jones, like none of that kind of stuff. Nothing with Big Ed Hurley, nothing with Norma. I don't think we see anything really with, Dr. Amp either. Jacoby.
Yeah.
Harry Dean Stanton as well. And Harry Dean Stanton for me was one of those people where I was I was a little worried that might feel impersonal or something, or not impersonal, feel impolite, impolitic to be that close to him. But other than that, anyway, so there were a lot of people here that there might have been more of. And the other thing that I was kind of fascinated by was how little McLaughlin is actually in these impressions.
Yeah, that's true. I had that thought about 3/4 of the way through.
Yeah, like you're kind of expecting that because he's like literally he's in 30 to 80% of every episode that he is going to have a kind of lot of presence on these documentaries. And he's really not in very many of them. Like you see him kind of engaging with Lynch a little bit before and after scenes start, but there's almost I think no sequences of Lynch directing him intensively. But there is some of that in both the Beamer short and the Lazarenko one. You get some kind of extensive back and forth with McLaughlin there. But anyway, I just thought that was fascinating.
Well, and also like the docs really center Lynch in all this, right?
Yes.
Like it's you get to see people like Sabrina Sutherland and his ADs, etc., sort of on the periphery. But like it's almost a joke in the documentary where in the narration they're talking about they briefly talk about Sabrina and they're like, what does she do? it's almost a joke because we really don't get a good sense of her job, which is clearly like extremely important and like that she's obviously like working her ass off behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But we really don't get to see a lot of that, and that's true of basically of like the vast majority of his collaborators.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I think you get surprisingly maybe a bit of a sense of the first AD's job. I think the first AD actually comes out as like pretty present here in terms of basically having to be the one that like helps get Lynch's vision out into the world according to the constraints of what's going on. And I think this is sort of fascinating too, again, to talk about like the way that this Jason S. guy and his collaborators structure the overall sense of these documentaries, which is that, again, it opens with the kind of dreamy narration stuff, and then we will go into like longish sequences of Lynch directing individuals, and these are often intercut with snippets from a production meeting, and it's difficult to tell, like, you know, Olivier's guess was this was just one long production meeting that had happened early on in the shoot, like, you know, maybe weeks before or often than what we're seeing later. But like, so this is one long prolonged thing where they're going through the script, basically scene by scene and setting up the shooting schedule and figuring out how many days can be given to which types of shoots and like how many pages of the scene for blah, 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 whatever. So they're figuring all this stuff out, and it's quite fascinating because, again, the camera's trained on Lynch through all of it. And it serves a kind of basic informational purpose for the documentary. So Lynch will be saying, you know, oh, we need to do this scene here, and this is what happens in this scene, and then we go watch him direct it. So there's that kind of element of it. But there is also the element in which, you know, this is Lynch sort of pushing out what he would just like to have things, how he would like things to go. And then almost inevitably you get Sabrina Sutherland and the first AD being like, well, we actually can't shoot that many days there, or we actually can't have that set at that specific time, or we have to remember that Jennifer Jason Leigh has to leave. And like, there's just something really fascinating there about like them kind of having to be these sort of necessary constraints on him, and like often having to take the brunt of Lynch's anger about certain things. I don't know. I found all of that like quite fascinating.
Yeah. And again, like, I don't want to overstate the anger aspect, because like it's a lot of the frustrations to me like seemed pretty reasonable, considering like the ambition of the project versus like the incredibly modest amount of resources they clearly had to work with. And like nothing in the documentary strikes me as like outright abusive or anything, or like even close to that line. It's just like pretty standard work frustration, really.
Oh yeah, no, totally. No, I certainly don't mean to paint a picture of him as like out of control or something. It's not that. I just think that it's more, I personally find it fascinating because I think those moments feel like some of the rare moments when you maybe get a sense of the side of Lynch that he is very careful to curate, to keep out of public view. And so for me, I actually find that really fascinating. Like he, you know, we all have this picture of him as this sort of like, again, the kind of Midwesterner guy who's very polite and like very happy and very like enthusiastic and sort of childlike in certain scenarios and wants to make things a certain way and is very excited about it. That's like a pretty common understanding of him. What I find fascinating is when you get a scene like when they're shooting the, Robert Nepper and Candy scene where she hits him with the remote control, which is hilarious to watch them film that. But she hits him with the remote control. And they're behind, you see Lynch directing this through the video set, and behind him there is again what you're guessing is Sabrina Sutherland and the first AD, and somebody says something like, well, do you want to get a close-up? And somebody else says, yeah, we should definitely get a close-up. And I think it's Sabrina Sutherland says something like, well, yeah, that way, we could make the scene shorter. Like, and Lynch just
yeah.
Right? Like he catches this, and he goes from being seemingly kind of mellow, although probably very focused, seemingly mellow, into he is really angry about this idea that people are trying to sort of manage this process away from away from being challenging, basically. Like, he's like, I mean, I'm not going to repeat the line for line because he swears very heavily in it, but he's like, who gives a, blanking blank about how long the scene is? Like, stop trying to make that a thing. Like, I don't care, and you shouldn't care either. And it's like, you're really clearly getting a window into Lynch's maybe unfiltered thoughts about how people should be reacting to these long scenes that he presents to them in a way that I think is very different than you get in a Lynch interview or something.
Yeah, and that sequence, watching him film that is the clearest example of what Lynch brings to the table, I think, because having seen it, we know how that scene turns out, and it's one of the most effective and funniest uses of this sort of prolonged moment in the entire show. So he's right. He is correct. He's correct to be suspicious about how the scene is being handled, and ultimately he's vindicated. People might not feel that way about every single production choice as it turned out, but I think that one was definitely unassailable. Hey, remember when we said we weren't going to get an hour out of this?
I know, and I have at least one or two more points I want to make, but the stuff I kind of wanted to talk about was more generally the Jason S. and the other people's work in terms of structuring stuff here overall. So do we have any other stuff we want to cover about Lynch and what we see in the shoot itself?
No, I mean, I think you're dead on about how this, and again, it's interesting to me that that this is included in the set, mm-hmm. and this stuff that runs counter to Lynch the brand or whatever. Lynch the guy who sells you coffee and stuff.
Yeah.
This is not we there's an early sequence where, and I think it's in the impressions where Jerry Horn, what's the actor's name anyway? Where he's playing him an Irish folk ditty, and they're just hanging out and just having a really blissed out time, and that's you kind of get early on you kind of get the Lynch you're expecting, and then very mm-hmm. very quickly that facade or whatever, or that not a facade because that's totally genuine as well, but you feel it seems like you're gonna get Zen Lynch for 5 hours, and then mm-hmm. that's totally not how it happens, and I wonder if that was also somewhat on purpose.
Yeah, maybe. And there's also something fascinating, too, I found in the first sort of bunch of hours watching this about how there's a really interesting way in which these documentaries maybe work, again, against a certain kind of mythos of Lynch as the director, but then ultimately maybe serve to reinforce it in the sense that there's all of these kind of stories about Lynch that circulate out in the world of his way of directing, and these kind of amazing, sort of insane, eccentric directions that he'll give to people, and these become stories, right? About, Renette Pulaski saying that he told her to walk like a broken doll, and those kinds of things, right? And these become these sort of famous things. And so you imagine, you kind of build up this idea in your head of Lynch is this sort of mystical figure on set who's giving people these strange sayings, and it's all just this strange stuff. But then
he's no, you're really mad in this scene.
Yeah, exactly. And then you watch these scenarios, and it's actually really straightforward a lot of the time. His engagement with people, it's kind of hilariously straightforward. The first bunch of these hours of things, it's him literally just saying to people, first you go here, and then you stand here, and then you say this, and then this door opens, and then you go here, and then you go here. This is what a lot of the kind of directing is. And so that's fascinating. I mean, again, what becomes clearer when you watch further into it is that often, he will give people these sort of very blank directions at the beginning, and then once they start shooting, Lynch will be off set, directing them through a megaphone. And that's often where like it feels like more of the kind of sculpting of the performance comes in, and Lynch will step in and be like, no, actually you should be hitting this line harder, you should be moving your hand here at this time. And that was fascinating to watch Lynch direct people like at that specific of a level. Because again, you hear so much about how he's so great with actors and he works so well with actors, and like I'm not sure I was expecting that to necessarily translate to Lynch literally telling actors like which lines, like which syllables to hit harder in different lines. That was all fascinating. So that was super interesting.
Yeah, and like the two other things, specific things I wanted to mention is there's a great little scene where he's sitting down with Nepper and Belushi, and like Nepper especially, who just seems like such a nice dude, is like they're like sort of excitedly discussing like they were like off somewhere talking about what they think their character's backstory was like. And like you just kind of get the sense that like this isn't really Lynch's bag. Like he does engage with them and he's friendly with them, but like it feels weird to have actors talk to him about like what they think the character background is, because like it just feels alien to the process, and it's like not a natural mesh. The other thing I wanted to mention is like one of my other favorite moments of direction also involves Belushi in the sheriff's station, when Belushi is just like utterly flabbergasted by whatever is supposed to be happening, and so Lynch is just like, you're very confused. He's like, oh, so like now? He's like, yeah.
Exactly, just like real life. Yeah, no, that was pretty great. It's true. Man, I actually feel like if we would probably just let ourselves talk forever about all this stuff that I'm so fascinated with and all of this. But one last thing I wanted to point out that was kind of fascinating, a kind of fascinating revelation watching this, like the on-set documentary stuff, was that you get a sense of like certain things that I had assumed were CGI actually being real, like in the show that they were filming, which is amazing. So for example, the set towards the end when now I'm blanking on when this happens. Maybe it's early on. I'm losing my mind. Where is the scene in the scenario in the season where we're in the red room and the curtains blow back and there's the white horse? That's early on, right? It's like in the first 2 episodes. So anyway, so when that scene happens and the curtains blow back and there's the white horse and the floor seems to go off for infinity, to me, I just was like, oh, well, that's all CGI. Like they just CGI'd that whole scene. Totally not true. The white horse is CGI. Everything else is real. They actually created a soundstage set that big that the floor like goes into shadow and the curtains blow back and it looks like it's sort of eternity or infinity or whatever, but it really just was a real soundstage. And I don't know, things like that. It was fascinating to see that. It was fascinating to see Lynch in I think it's maybe the Lazarica run or one of the Beamer ones where they're filming Cheryl Lee and her kind of like exit from the red room in the early episodes where she's zoomed up out of the camera. And at first it wasn't that, like she wasn't being sort of zoomed up off screen. She was supposed to kind of disappear down on this like sort of like elevator thing that's going down. And Lynch hates it and like comes up with on set the idea that she should be going up into the air. Then they want to try to put her in a harness, but they don't have the right like stunt people and equipment, so they can't. And then it sort of drops off. You don't see what happens, but clearly Lynch then took that and went to post-production and figured out a way to kind of zoom her up through CGI, which I don't know. I just found all of that fascinating to see this like thought process happening kind of materially as they're shooting was amazing.
You had some other things you wanted to say about sort of the form of the documentary?
Yes, yeah, and then we should probably start to wrap up. But the last couple of things I wanted to say about this was I wanted to point out some things that I thought the director of it deserved credit for. One was he's doing some really fascinating stuff, particularly in the early half of the Impression stuff, with like sound editing and the way that he's actually putting together the footage of Lynch that I thought was quite smart. So, things like he'll be directing Jerry Horn, and he'll say, like first you'll see Jerry shooting or rehearsing a scene where he yells out and he's screaming in the woods or something, and then you'll see Lynch directing him again, and he'll say, oh no, you do this, and do this, and before that, and then you yell out, and you hear Jerry yelling, it's clearly just it's clearly just been replayed like into the scene, and so that's interesting, and he'll do things like that throughout, where he'll kind of he'll sound edit in Lynch talking from the next shot while Lynch is still talking in the current shot to create this kind of like frenzy that you clearly feel Lynch is sort of bringing to his direction around some actor or something. Like subtle things like that I thought just were really sharp and like created a kind of really interesting flow and conceptually strengthened whatever the point was without being intrusive. I liked that.
But that just reminded me, sorry, of one more directorial thing I wanted to make sure that I mentioned, which is that the scenes of Lynch directing that little boy were so great. Like the way he just like talks him through like the stuff that could be scary or stressful. It's just like that should probably be like shown in directing classes on how to deal with kids.
It is true, although then there's kind of a hilarious counterpoint when they're trying to film the scene in the FBI station where the FBI people have brought in the wrong family, and there's the 3 little kids that are like screaming, and you get like 5 minutes of Lynch trying to get these like 2-year-old kids to roll around in exactly the right way while making the exact right noise. And like Lynch keeps his cool, he doesn't lose his cool, but it is pretty funny watching Lynch trying to direct these like 2-year-olds. It's kind of amazing. But anyway, no, so the last thing I wanted to say about the structure stuff was I feel like we should maybe acknowledge a little more of these sort of like opening kind of like ethereal narration sequences and how they relate to what's going on. So, I will admit, like when they first started and they first began, I wasn't so crazy about them at first. Like I think as you kind of intimated there at the beginning, Simon, like it feels a little bit like people trying to sort of operate like Lynch, or like that they're sort of trying to do this kind of quote Lynchian thing, and it maybe doesn't always feel like it exactly works or something, or it feels like too obvious or something in what it's trying to do, and it didn't feel like, to me, I was like, I don't know if this is really going to be that great. But I will say it like kind of grew on me, and part of it is I think I need to go back and watch them again. Like maybe the first time through, you're so focused on just getting to the production footage that you just are like, what is this? Like get to the production footage. So I will say that I want to go back and watch them again. But I will say that what I liked about it, like part of what grew on me about it was I had to get over what was maybe, I don't want to say unfortunate, but like a kind of a hilarious choice of having this person with the German accent read the narration, because it's inevitable that it sounds like Herzog. Like I can't help it. It's like you have somebody making this kind of like, these like, oh, we are in the jungle and everything is strange. And it's like, of course it sounds like Herzog. It's like, it's impossible that people are not making that connection. And so for me, that felt a little odd. I mean, I was like, maybe this is on purpose. Like Lynch and Herzog are basically contemporaries. They know each other. Like I was like, maybe this is purposeful. Couldn't really tell. But anyway, once you sort of get past that kind of Herzog thing, then it works a little differently. And what I did like about it was, I think it's at a certain point, it becomes it feels less like they are trying to operate in some kind of Lynchian mode, and more what they are doing is that they are kind of playing up this idea of, I don't know, like Dennis's book is called David Lynch, The Man from Another Place. They're sort of trying to riff on this sort of sensibility of Lynch as almost an alien in his own kind of time and space, and like this idea of him having a sort of alien view on something. And so it's like their narration is structured as if this figure is like an alien kind of force that's coming in and witnessing all of this footage being filmed and everything happening from the outside, as if there were sort of an alien being. And like, they don't make it quite that literal, but that's the implication. And then that sort of plays out in terms of, again, these very uncanny establishing shots that they're shooting with the drones, where they're sort of zooming over either cityscapes that are made very unfamiliar by being shot directly from overhead, or landscape sequences where, again, the kind of static nature of the moving camera is so strange and weird. And I like this idea that like what they're trying to, they're operating the same level of like, making present day America strange in the way that The Return, I think, really does. And I actually thought I thought that worked very well in terms of what they were doing. And like, I thought it was a good extension of an idea of what the show is after, rather than just trying to mimic Lynch or trying to be like Lynch or something. So I liked that. I don't know. Does that strike you as reasonable?
I like your explanation of it. I'm not sure that the execution was always there. And again, some of the specific choices were like a little bit out there, but mind you, I have to say I was distracted for a lot of what you just said, because I was imagining what a Herzog doc about Lynch would be like. and they've I believe that he had some involvement with My Son, What Have You Done? Didn't he produce
He did. He produced it. Yeah, he produced it. Yeah. People haven't seen My Son, What Have You Done? You should go watch it. Or also, if people really like The Return, they should definitely seek out Herzog's Bad Lieutenant, Bad Lieutenant, New Orleans, Port of Call, or whatever the full title is. They should absolutely seek that out, because this is just occurring to me right now, but that is maybe one of the few things that I think actually operates at a similar level to The Return. There's some really fascinating formal comparison stuff between Bad Lieutenant and The Return that we should probably talk about later.
Yeah. Has anyone ever written about that period of Herzog versus this period of Lynch? Because there's a lot of overlap there that hadn't even really occurred to me until just now, like these last few seconds.
Yeah, exactly. Me as well. No, I had not thought of that. My son, What Have You Done? Has some similarities too to this kind of Lynch stuff as well. There's definitely some crossover, even in terms of like production style and schedule and shoots and everything too. There's some similarity there. No, this is fascinating. Yeah. Anyway,
I have a quick story about My Son, What Have You Done? Which is that I saw it. So the first TIFF that I went to was that year. And I went to a Midnight Madness screening of this horrifically terrible movie that I won't name here because it's needless slander, but it was like one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Okay. And I didn't get back to where I was staying until probably about 3 a.m. And that's probably more like 4. And so I had a morning press screening of My Son, What Have You Done? The next day at like 8. So I got maybe 2.5 hours of sleep, and I schlepped over to this press screening. And if you've seen My Son, What Have You Done? That is not it's not a movie that you want to be taking like power naps during.
I have a story to follow this up when you're done, Simon. So keep going, because this is perfect. This is too great. Anyway, keep going.
Because I'm sure you remember the sequence with Vern Troyer in the woods, or by the whatever.
No. I just sweared. Sorry. Oops. Yes, I do vaguely remember that. Okay, keep going. Yep.
Yeah. So at a certain point, I did start to nod off a bit, and when I woke up, it was a smack dab in the middle of that sequence, and I thought I was losing my mind.
My story is actually hilariously similar. So when My Son, What Have You Done? Played at Telluride, we on the opening night of the festival, sometimes they'll show staff films on the opening night, so that we aren't trying to get into the same films as all of the rich people basically are trying to get into. And on that opening night, they showed staff some film, there was some early film first. But then the idea was that there was going to be a double header, and we were going to watch My Son, What Have You Done? Afterwards. But we were waiting for Herzog to introduce it, and he was tied up, and he'd been delayed leaving Venice or something, so he didn't get there till quite late. And then he got there and did this introduction, and it was long, but who cares, because it's Herzog, so it's great. But the film didn't actually start until, I don't know, midnight. It was supposed to start earlier, and it didn't start till midnight, so it was super late. Everyone, the staff, have been killing themselves all day, running around getting this festival going, blah, blah, blah. And I remember the film starts, and it was like a joke. It was the lights go down, the lights come up on the screen, and I turn around, and everyone in the whole theater is fast asleep. 500 people had immediately fallen asleep during the screening of What Have You Done? And I held out a little longer than everyone else, but as you say, I basically slept off and on through the whole thing. And that movie is not a movie that you want to be waking up in the middle of and out of a dream. And you're oh my God, is that an ostrich and Michael Shannon and I don't know, a cliff and Willem Dafoe? It's crazy.
And
but anyway.
even if you're completely lucid, the line readings make you feel why is this?
And Grace Zabriskie's in it too, right? Grace Zabriskie plays his mother. Oh man, there's some good stuff in here. Now I really want to go back and watch both of those again, next to The Return. I really want to do that. Well, maybe when we have our next guests on, we could suggest that or something, or we could have watched them.
Sorry for that, long tangent that won't be of interest to if you're not one of the 7 people who watched My Son, What Have You Done? Without falling asleep for some portion of it.
Yeah, they are fun films. But all right, anyway, I think I have said mostly my piece about this, and I think again, like the idea is that we might end up covering some of this stuff again when we have our actually more official roundtable podcast at the end here with our guests. Knock on wood, and we will talk maybe again about some of these features at that point. So, looking forward to that, and hopefully all scheduling things happen the way that we want them to, and that should be coming in not too long for our very devoted and lovely listeners who, by the way, I miss having the podcast a lot. I miss getting to talk to Simon every week about Twin Peaks, and I miss our lovely listeners. So it's nice to be back, even just briefly, for this conversation.
Now, I have one more question, which is that, are you going to see Star Wars for Laura Dern? Because I am.
I think I'm going to see Star Wars because Olivier works for a company of nerds and they rent out a theater and show it to the staff. So we're going to go for that because it's free. But I will be very glad to see Laura Dern, who, by the way, is like getting all of this awesome attention right now that I'm very happy about. They're about to do a full retrospective of Laura Dern, or maybe not full, but a big retrospective of Laura Dern cinema at Lincoln Center in New York. She's going to be there. There was a theater in Boston that just did a big retrospective of Laura Dern stuff. She's like getting all of the good responses that Laura Dern should be getting because she's amazing. And I hope that she wins all of the things. And I know that they're submitting the Twin Peaks people for like the Golden Globes. I think they missed the Emmys for this year, but they're submitting them for the Golden Globes. So like, I hope they win things. I mean, I feel like the critical, again, we said this early on that we were worried that like the general critical response was not going to be able to handle something as crazy as The Return. And I am still pretty pleased that like, that hasn't really turned out to be the case, that even fairly mainstream kind of critical publications are very much behind this show and are really supporting it. And so I really hope things like awards, who I don't care about, but I know they matter a lot to like the economy of these kinds of things. I hope that they do the right thing and give some love to The Return.
I just hope that they, just to piss everyone off, they submitted it for all the movie categories and all the miniseries categories and all the series categories.
That would be awesome. In my dream world, David Lynch wins a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor.
Yes!
He's been submitted. He was one of the ones that they submitted. So you just never
actually,
know.
That's the last thing I'm going to mention is that you don't get really Lynch the actor in the features either.
That's true. You don't get as much of that as one might like, but I don't know. It's true. Well, we just have to keep watching The Return. And someone out there who's like an engineering person, you have to get on building Simon and I this app where we can just like feed The Return into it and play it on a never-ending self-generating loop. That would be
can
amazing.
I just get like an ocular implant for that?
Hook it to my veins.
All right.
All right. Yeah. Time to go. Unfortunately, time to go.
Yes, it is time to go. You should follow Kate on Twitter @Cinnamon. What's your Instagram, by the way?
Oh, God knows. I think it's Kate Renabaum. I have no idea. I'm never on there. Like I feel bad when
massively popular Instagram.
when McLaughlin shared me, I don't know. I had to. I like had not even looked at it in ages, so I had to go back and fix it. But I will say again, just as a shout out to how awesome McLaughlin is, when he first announced that I had won on Instagram, I don't think he knew what my handle was, so he just put it up. So like people weren't actually really finding me. And then to McLaughlin's credit, like 2 days later, he went back and edited the post to include my handle. Like I didn't ask him to do that; he just did that, and I was like, he's a nice guy, man. That's a quality person right there.
He's a very nice boy.
Indeed.
So yeah, you can find me on Twitter if you want, at Hollow Minds, and that's it. Check out Sorted Cinema, who are hosting us graciously as always. We're going to be putting up our lists, end of year lists soon. So I know I don't actually like lists, but everyone else does. So I guess there'll be some of those soon. I'm going to have to start putting together a film ballot, which is frustrating. But anyway, so as we've said, we do have one more plan. Don't expect it till the new year. I'm going to say optimistically mid-January. So, please don't hold your breath. You will die. And have a happy holiday season, everybody.
Yeah, happy holidays. Bye.
On the 12th day of Christmas, my sweetheart gave to me 12 cups of coffee.
Lemon cherry pie.
10 Jolene Leo.
9 owls lurking.
8 dancing midgets.
7 one-armed men.
6 fish in a percolator.
5 dozen donuts. What?
4 talking logs.
3 possessed souls. 2 secret diaries.
And a body. Dead. Wrapped in plastic.
Amen. Amen.